Armenia. I have two major themes I'm going to talk about today. My paper consists of the first part, theoretical, conceptual idea about development. What is political development, economic development for a country like Armenia? And then the second part is more like policy oriented. So in this paper, I raise and try to understand questions concerning the government's role in developing the country and the influence the public exercise. This presentation, I will focus on two main conceptual models to explain how the overall political process operates throughout society and government. First, elitism, the idea of elitism, political elitism, and the other model that I have in mind is pluralism. I'm going to talk about each briefly. And then, along with these two theoretical and conceptual models to understand the relationship between government and society in Armenia, I will connect these models to two sets of key elements of development and a set of elements or variables about state building and institutionalization. The question, therefore, I have is, which of the models best captures and advances the basic workings of Armenian developmental politics? Since the early 1990s, Armenian political thinking, we should note, that reflected on a country in which democratic practice bore little resemblance to the developmental ideals. So my job here, or my attempt here, and try to continue this paper in the future, to see lay down the foundation of that developmental ideal. At the very outset, first, I should say that the politics of development in Armenia seems to be largely restricted by the presidential model of democracy. The constitutional language concerning presidential power has little, if any, flexibility for interpretation. The president is clearly given the constitutional authority to, quote-unquote, ensure the regular functioning of the legislative, executive, and judicial powers. Look at Chapter 3, Article 49 of the Constitution. Of course, many advocates of executive power say that it's important to have a strong executive for efficient government, and also important to promote centralized nation's security concerns. Well, that's true, but on the other hand, the independent functioning of legislative and judicial institutions is largely reduced to presidential decrees. Armenia does not have a system of checks and balances. There are special limitations on the National Assembly, clearly noted in Chapter 3 and also Chapter 4 of the Constitution. One of the most important limitations is the presidential dissolution of the National Assembly, if the National Assembly does not give an approval to the program of the government. And you find this in Chapter 4, Article 74, Clause 1 of the Constitution. And then, in the same article, you see three other clauses that give the President authority to dissolve the National Assembly. Now, if we look at the executive branch itself, within the executive institution, the system of collective leadership also is incompatible with constitutional reality, and also is inconsistent with Armenian practice. The president, in other words, is not first among equals. Rather, he is the person in charge. Cabinet members, or government, they call it in their constitution, are presidential appointees, not surprising, serving at the president's wishes. Power is exercised on a daily basis mostly by appointed government officials who are far accountable to the public. So in this precarious fortunes of the people, both the masses and organized groups, we are reminded that the pervasive elitism of the Armenian political system is dominantly existent. So as a consequence, the politics of development in Armenia remains limited to the elite preferences and largely neglects the multiplicity of social and economic needs of the people. Now, what do I mean by elitism? First, I should say that there is a clear absence of a republic in Armenia, characterized by dispersal of power among the public that elects and holds the key leaders accountable. What can easily be observed is a policy-making process best explained and interpreted as elitism. In this interpretation, power is concentrated among economic and political elites who represent a small segment of the society. These elites largely share similar neoliberal values and beliefs and dominate the political and policy-making process. This, to me, suggests that there is a class elitism in Armenia, closely entwined with institutional elitism. The term class elitism here accounts for the class differences and the disproportionate amount of economic and political power that resides with the upper class in Armenian society and government. The institutional elitism focuses on how economic and political elites occupy and dominate positions of decision-making within key institutions throughout society and government. The general public exercises little or no influence within the political system that is essentially elitist in nature. A disproportionate amount of power lay with the leaders of businesses and government institutions. These leaders also share the same general neoliberal beliefs as a result of common socioeconomic backgrounds, similar post-Soviet socialization experiences, and opportunity-driven and liberalized interactions. So therefore, in my mind, there's an interpretations. Or the interpretation of elitism that I have of Armenian politics would first include three levels. First, include a large, apathetic, and mass society at the bottom. Second, a limited pluralist politics involving somewhat organized interests, large number of NGOs. There's something like 2,700 NGOs in Armenia. And political parties active in government and society at the middle. And third, an elitist politics dominated by business ownership, top government officials, and the association of the two operating within the largely shared neoliberal beliefs and ideological consensus at the highest levels of power. Elitism also, I have 5 minutes? That's impossible. Elitism also contains a partisan dimension. It does not nullify the democratic principles embodied in the Constitution. Chapter 2 of the Constitution, for example, enumerates fundamental civil rights and liberties in Articles 14 to 48. See, this is not to refute democracy, but with the rise of close association between businesses and government and mass society, since independence, Armenia had steadily been emerged into an elitist system. So if in fact Armenia has to transform into a genuine democratic system, then pluralism should prevail in the evolution of Armenian politics. And in the middle of state building and political practice, the pluralist interpretation of Armenian politics will reflect the formation of a multi-party parliamentary system and diversity of thought. Its implementation will be a huge leap forward against the economic elite, the oligarchs who continue to plunder the nation and use state institutions to submit the population into their own system. Now, the other model that I have, I call it pluralism. The essential elements in understanding the Armenian pluralism is the existence of multi-party factions, of social forces, and organized groups. Pluralism is conceived as a general public consisting of many groups operating in different spheres of life. Under this general conception, various groups representing different objectives and views compete for influence throughout society and the government. The decentralization of authority and influence among groups with various goals represent the parliamentary form of democratic practice, in which marginal groups and individual rights do not give up to the upper class group. This in turn can give rise to a constant dynamic relationship between political majority and the leadership. However, not all Armenians are part of this democratic practice because of their poor membership in different groups, nor are their beliefs represented in different organizations. Pluralist society and the parliamentary democracy are not developed in Armenia despite the constitutionally established multi-party system and a large number of socio-economic organizations that could help paying power to secure the consent of all. Ideological pluralism and multi-party system are recognized in the Constitution. This is in Article 7 of the Constitution. So generally speaking, institutions of the state are likely to be stronger in a pluralist society. In contrast, in a homogeneous and mass society, and in the absence of diverse groups and interests, there's the risk of authoritarian or oligarchic type of domination. Earlier this month, of course, we witnessed a mass society behavior in the parliamentary election. The mass or homogenized society is vulnerable to political domination, destructive of democratic institutions, and invites authoritarian system. For the integrity and stability of the Armenian political culture, functionally significant and meaningful groups and associations are needed. A pluralist political system is founded on the existence of competing groups representing diverse views. It increases the likelihood of incremental change and contributes to stability. Pluralism encourages steady development process through incremental change. This is important for Armenia because the rise of unorganized and mass society in the post-Soviet era promoted too much neoliberal freedom and too much potential for abrupt change and too little order. Competing groups representing diverse interests and policies create the barriers between the emerging leadership and the mass public that were essential to prevent the rise of oligarchic elites. This was my first one. Now I'm going to move on to policy orientation of the paper. And I have 2 slides on it. Yeah? You allow me to do that? I have 2 slides that I want to show.